Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about X-Men 97 Season 2. You know something, I've been wondering, when a whole year passed in continuity of this show, are they still going to call it 97? Like, I don't get that. Like, each season should be like a different year, but whatever. So, that was season 2. Season 2 has divided the fandom hugely. There are some people who love it, some people who hate it, some people who think it's okay, and other people just think it's and everything. So clearly you can tell there are two cooks in the kitchen and everything. One is former showrunner Bo DeMayo, and the other one is the What If showrunner, Brad Winterbaum. And when it comes to Brad Winterbaum, I was worried going into this season because of the simple fact he's responsible for Marvel What If. I personally hate Marvel What If. I can't get into that show no matter what. I have tried multiple times. I've tried multiple seasons and just random episodes, and I just can't do it. The only one I was able to force myself to watch was the zombie episode, only because I had watched Marvel Zombies and I wanted to know how everything started. So I literally had to force myself to watch that zombie episode, and it was one of the most painful things I had to do. I just don't like his style of storytelling. It's bland, it's odd, it's boring, and it just doesn't engage me. So, needless to say, I was very worried going into this season when I heard he was going to be the new showrunner. And I was even more worried because of the fact that because of Bo DeMayo's massive dismissal, to this point, we still don't know exactly what all happened. We just heard that he's very difficult to work with. He sent some explicit photos to the staff talking about, see these pictures of me, I want you to like use that for inspiration to draw like these characters, the poses and stuff. And apparently they was either half naked or naked. I don't know if that's true, but if you go to his Threads account, it's a good possibility that is true. Like, all that man does is basically pose half naked and you almost see stuff. And it's just kind of like, dude, why are you putting that on Threads? You have an OnlyFans page. Put that on that. Like, not everybody wants to see that. So I kind of do believe part of the reason he got fired was because of the pictures. But once again, nobody really knows for sure. And so, like, wait, what was I saying before? So I'm getting old. I'm losing my train of thought. So let's see. I was worried about I was worried about Brad Winterbaum coming in, changing stuff, and Bo DeMayo. I don't know. But anyways, you can clearly tell there's two cooks in the kitchen. Like, their storytelling is completely different. And Brad Winterbaum clearly, tried to replicate what Bo DeMayo brought to season 1 with the storytelling and everything. And it reminds me of this, like, B-boy group called Jabberwockies. They were on this one reality show, I think America's Best Breakdancer, back in the 2010s, I think it was, or early 2000s. Excellent reality show. And the Jabberwockies, they had this phrase, often duplicated but never replicated, or something like that. Or often replicated but never duplicated. I can't remember which one it was. And that's how X-Men 97 Season 2 is. It feels different. And I mean, it feels different. It feels rushed. You can tell that like two completely different storylines are going on, and one, they have to distance themselves because, yeah, like I was saying before, they had to rewrite a lot of what Bo DeMayo did because they don't want to give him credit, and they completely reworked season three because he had all this planned out and everything. And it's very jarring. Like, I did not enjoy this season whatsoever. I was bored most of the time. There was way too much dialogue. The storytelling felt so inconsistent. Going off of season one, I assumed it was gonna be this huge age of like apocalypse type thing. And that was so squandered. Then there's the action. The action, there's barely any. And when there is, it's very sped up. And it's constantly bouncing around. And I don't know where to focus my eyes at because it's just going so fast. Or what they'll do is they'll pan far away back to see everybody fighting at the same time. Then it starts to travel from one person to another, seeing what they're doing, and one continuous shot. And I can't focus because I don't know where I'm supposed to be looking because I'm assuming, okay, I like this character, so I'm finna focus on this person, but the camera goes in a different direction. I'm like, oh crap, now I gotta focus on this person. There are some characters this season that feel pointless, and like take Bishop. I still don't understand why Bishop is still in the show. Don't get me wrong, I do like him. But in the original series, he was used like every once in a while, but only when it's like time travel type episodes. And those episodes were always epic. Now he's just part of the team, and it's just kind of like, why? Why doesn't he want to return back to his time and see if everything's okay? And I have a feeling Bo DeMayo did bring him in mainly because, you know, Bo's black and Bishop's black and everything. But when he did use Bishop, like he used them somewhat in an important kind of way. Also, Bo DeMayo's storytelling. The thing about Bo DeMayo season one, while season one is not perfect, I do have problems with that. It's it is quick paced, but not as quick as like season two. But the thing about season one is that you truly felt like there was an actual real story plot going on. It followed the same formula as the original series, you know. The original series will start off in the first episode with your primary main villain, setting everything up. Then after that is nothing but a bunch of filler episodes. Getting to know the characters, giving people their solo episodes, group episodes, bringing in other villains and characters, having a good old time, you know what I'm saying? Then somewhere in the middle, it starts to pick up to what the big story arc is about. Then about the last couple of episodes, it is concluding that huge story arc with that central villain and everything. And that's how every season was. That's why I own the original series on DVD, except for the last two. Season 5 I hate. Season 4 is not bad. It's just I really didn't care for it. You can tell they was running thin out of like creativity. A bunch of like 2-parters, 3-parters, 4-parters, and multiple episodes and stuff. Bringing in as many random villains as you can. And it just started getting a bit repetitive, even though I still do like season 4. Season 5 I just hate. And so Bo DeMayo did that same formula. Like, you know, he started off with like, you know, a certain like plot thread. And carried the rest of the series through. You know who your main central villain was. It was a bit of a twist and everything. And he threw in other multiple twists. Like when Storm lost her power, it was like, my God. Like, what's gonna happen now? Then the whole Madeline Pryor type thing, you know? Then the whole Magneto subplot. And then the whole Magneto Road Gambit subplot. Then the whole Gambit dying and everything, that big massacre we had on Genosha. And, you know, then who the main villain was a lot of people never heard of if you don't follow the comics. And of course, he was never a villain in the original series. So that was new and fresh and something to learn from, you know. Then the huge twist at the like very end where like everybody's getting like thrown, sucked through time and everything and separated. Then Apocalypse, you know, finding Gambit's card, and you kind of like, oh, you know what's gonna happen next season. He's gonna make Gambit into like, you know, one of his four horsemen. And I'm like, yes, I'm finally gonna get to see that Gambit design from the comics with the long whitish type hair, the grayish black looking face, the red eyes, and that demonic look. And then what I got was just a watered down version of all that. Gambit looked normal as normal could be, but just his color was different. He had the gray skin, the white hair, but he just looked like his normal self. And I'm just like, and he was just still his charming normal self. And I just didn't like that. The whole Apocalypse storyline was boring. And how do you make Apocalypse boring? Like, seriously. And then there's like, you know, and you can tell Brad Winterbaum tried his best to make those shocking moments like what Bo did. But Bo did it very naturally and organic, and it really came as a surprise. I will say Magneto dying in the way he did was a huge shocker, but it was kind of similar to what X-Men Evolution did when you assume Apocalypse killed like Magneto, Storm, and Professor Xavier. Only the huge twist was they didn't die. They was just turned into the Four Horsemen. And they were scary. Because, you know, they couldn't just kill off a character. But here, you can kill off characters now. So it was shocking, and it felt brutal and everything. But then everything that happened after that just kind of got squandered and everything. There were really no huge twists here and there. When there were twists, they were kind of lame and boring. And then the one twist that did come was, who the heck killed Apocalypse? I was like, oh, it was Gambit. But then it's like, really? Gambit killed Apocalypse as a Four Horseman? The Apocalypse? Like, come on, man. That does not feel realistic whatsoever. And that's because it's from the what if writing staff. And I hate the way they write. And you can tell they tried to duplicate what Bo did, but they just could not replicate it the way he did. You know, and for reals. And not only that, but where on earth were all the X-Men and everything? Like, one thing I noticed about this season compared to the last season and compared to the original series, where were the X-Men and where were all the solo episodes at? Yeah, Wolverine got a solo episode, but it was just a rehash of like a similar episode that happened in the original series. They never truly explain why the group of villains who hate Wolverine to death would ever join with him to go back to the Weapon X facility and everything. And Yuriko really had no business being there because she wasn't part of Weapon X and everything. And like, seriously, Sabretooth's gonna join him and everything? Like, that's just so weird. And it wasn't even that good of an episode because they just brought in the Brood and everything. And it's like, why exactly? And then we find out that, oh, Wolverine just did all that so he could get his metal claws back. And Morph was really upset because he felt used and almost died because of that. And Wolverine's all like, maybe you just don't know me very well and everything. This is just who I am. Like, showing that he is that dirty, underhanded character who will do whatever it takes. But Wolverine is more than just that. He is a caring, compassionate person. And then that's really the only time we see Wolverine in the entire season. And not only that, but in Wolverine's own solo episode, Wolverine is barely in it. It starts off with Wolverine, then he disappears for the longest time. Then when you refine him, he turns into a brood, and then he's cured after getting his adamantium, and then it's just him talking at the end, and then he disappears for the rest of the season. And we never get that conclusion of how Morph feels about him after feeling betrayed and feeling used. Because we know Morph has a huge crush on him. Which, that was something that was brought up a lot in season 1 with the imagery and everything. And here is just kind of, they don't want to touch it and everything. Now, Bo touched it because Bo's openly gay and everything. But here it's just whatever, and they kind of just hey, let's move away from this story. It's gonna offend a certain crowd of people, you know what I'm saying, who always screams the word woke and everything like that. But then not only that, but then there were other episodes that felt very similar, like the Gyrich Creed episode and Colossus and putting him on trial and the Nightcrawler stuff. When they went to the Savage Land, well, who was it? It was Bishop. What's her name? Lorna, I think her name is. And maybe Beast. It's kind of okay, they see a dinosaur, then they disappear for the rest of the episode, only to show up at the end, and of course there's a huge battle. And that's what I really hate. They will start off with an interesting plot, then it's full of dialogue, then all of a sudden people just disappear randomly in the episode, and then there's a huge quick battle at the very, very end. And that's not good enough for me. Although that episode was really good because it was Nightcrawler pleading the jury and the judge and everything not to execute his brother, and his brother's a huge bigot, but of course Nightcrawler is that holy religious person and forgives people and stuff. And so and that was a really interesting episode because Creed is running for president, and a lot of mutants hate him, and these other people are putting him on trial for all the bad stuff he's did. And here comes his brother, a mutant who looks very monstrous and demonic, is pleading for him to be spared. And you have one of the nicest mutants being the judge and everything, and he's upset because of course his sister just died and everything. And then you find out that at the end, Colossus was going to have him executed no matter what, despite that passionate plea from that of Nightcrawler. But of course, Nightcrawler got pissed at his brother and left him out in the cold to die, but he survived, and now he became president. Now, in the comics, he never became president. Mystique took him out before all that could happen and stuff. But here, they're basically doing the one thing that so many other shows are doing and making their shows suck. And that is what's going on currently in American politics is now being implemented on screen. Every single time that happens, a show suffers. The Canadian slasher show called Slasher did it in the 3rd season. And after that, that was basically the last good season. And I still don't know why they dabbled in our politics, because it's a Canadian show. But it was around 2016, 17. And of course, that's all you heard about, and that's all you saw on television. Star Trek Picard dealt with it. The Boys dealt with it, and it really helped ruin their like franchise. Now Daredevil Born Again did it, and I do not like season 2 whatsoever. Not because they delved into politics, even though that irritated me because I'm tired of hearing about politics, but mainly because season 2 is just not very good. And now this show wants to do it, and now this show is starting not to be very good and everything. And not to mention, another thing Bo DeMayo did was that he made sure character. Oh wait, before I go into that, let me talk about Magic. Like Magic, yeah, I'm not showing no pictures. I'm just gonna have one big main picture up because I just don't feel like it because I don't like this season. But Magic, something's not consistent. Like at least Bo tried to be consistent with the original series and stuff. Here is like Colossus' sister Magic. She was a little girl in the original series. This takes place exactly after the original series. How is she an older teenager, look like a grown woman and everything? And why does she have her comic book accurate costume on for? That doesn't explain nothing, and then she dies. And why does Colossus have his classic 80s uniform on? And Colossus never wore a uniform in the original series. He just wore that tank top and some jeans. Like, what the heck is going on? I know the original series sometimes did that. Was not consistent, like with Cable's origin. They gave him two completely different origins. And then there's Angel, who has two completely different origins. And then there's Beast. All of a sudden they show him finally with no hair and his human looking form back in the day in the first class uniform. But that's because they really goofed up back in the 90s, and that's just how it was, you know what I'm saying? And so like, but here you expect people not to do stuff like that. But yeah. But one of the things Bo made sure is that when he did those filler episodes, people got their justification, people got their due, people got their character development. He made sure Wolverine wasn't the center of attention like Fox has done for the past 20 years. And it's to the point where a lot of people just don't like Wolverine no more because of that. So he didn't make Wolverine the central main character, but he still implemented, still had Wolverine jump up sporadically, say cool one-liners or do something really cool. He still had him involved in the story. Here is just we see Wolverine in his feral outfit. Then he disappears for a couple of episodes. Then, he gets his claws back in that solo episode, and then he completely disappears, and he's back to wearing his 80s outfit. Where the heck has he been? Where the heck has Morph been? Why hasn't Jean and Cyclops done much? That's one of the things Bo wanted to do, is that he wanted to make Cyclops cool again because Fox really screwed him up. And a lot of the later cartoons, they tried to duplicate what those Fox movies did, and they kept sidelighting Cyclops. And X-Men Evolution, yeah, he's the field leader and everything, but he never really truly takes command, and Wolverine is much older than him because this Cyclops is a teenager, and Wolverine bosses him around. It isn't until the third season that Cyclops, stands up to Wolverine and everything. But then after he does that, he's back to just being who he always is, being a side character. Then in Wolverine, the X-Men, Wolverine's now the leader and Cyclops is pissed off. The X-Men anime gave Cyclops his justice due and everything and made him that leader that people respect. But that's one thing Bo also wanted to do as well. But Bo also just wanted to make the dude kind of cool with one-liners, using his powers kind of in a reckless, cool kind of way. Here, Cyclops is just a side background character again. And so is Jean. Like, Bo made sure he gave her something interesting to do with that Madeline Pryor episode and having the baby, then having to give up the baby, and and like other stuff like that. And now Jean is relegated to just being Cyclops' like wife. That's basically just it. Because like when they got separated in time, I'm all like, cool, this is gonna be some cool stuff we're gonna get to see. And it wasn't. Because a lot of time has passed during the time travel stuff. And they found out why they was brought through time and everything, because that woman wanted to stop Apocalypse during two different time periods in case one X-Men team like failed and everything. And so basically now Cable's a teenager and we get a bunch of CW's foo-foo like, dialogue talking about like only you can do it, Cable. Just look deep down inside you and find that inner strength and use your power. I hate hearing crap like that. I'm tired of hearing crap like that. And those first couple of episodes were really, really boring and everything, only for them to go back to like the present day. And then after that, they're just relegated to side characters. They argue with Cable here and there, and that's about it. Cable was interesting this season because he just does what he always wants to do. He just wants to kill Apocalypse and be like a brute and everything. Jubilee is still trying to make cool, but I'm tired of her and the bubblegum and everything. Sometimes it does feel a little forced that she's this skilled in fighting now, but you gotta remember months have passed by and she's been training. But the fact of the matter is that she didn't rejoin the X-Men and join, I think, what was it, X Factor or X Force? I can't remember which one it is. And that was kind of interesting, but of course, comics and stuff like that. And they really put some emphasis on Lorna this season. But like it's weird because then they had just that random like Danger Room episode. And it's just kind of like, what purpose does this serve? Because this is just like the most random episode possible and stuff. Why did the Danger Room all of a sudden just come alive with an AI and everything? And that's because of the comics and stuff. And I remember Wolverine and the X-Men, they made Master Mold look like that version of like, the Danger Room that took sentient life. And it's just kind of like, why? This is like the most random thing ever. And it doesn't tie into the rest of the story, really. And even X-Men Evolution could make a random episode and tie it into something else. These people can't do that because it's the what if people and stuff. But the main focus that was really jarring this season was X Corp. Now it's a completely different lineup than the comics, and they're wearing completely different suits. They're wearing their Grant Morrison suits, I believe, from the new X-Men comics. And some people like these suits and other people don't. These suits just look kind of weird on the 90s version of the X-Men. Like, the point of bringing the 90s version back was to have them in their really elaborate, like, corny, like, comic book costumes from the 90s and stuff. And yes, at the very end, it was a treat seeing them in their 80s costumes. That was kind of like for fan service, but was that ever gonna last? And like now, all of a sudden, they're in these brand new suits, and because of the art style, they just come off looking flat. Because the art style has been tweaked this season and everything. something about this art style just looks weird and inkish and flat. It doesn't look as good as the original series, and it doesn't look as good as season one of like 97. It just looks kind of odd and bland. And so these new X-Men costumes from Grant Morrison, they just look weird on these characters and these versions. If you was gonna bring these costumes in, I would have preferred just create a brand new X-Men series and call it that. But now the X-Men is no more because Professor Xavier had a breakdown that Magneto is dead and everything. And it's all like, you know what, screw it. We're going to start doing things our way and everything and not listen to the government and enforce our will and stuff like that to protect people and stuff. So he created X Corp. And X Corp only has certain X-Men in it because there's X Corp. There are still the X-Men with like Storm and Wolverine and Morph only. There is X Factor, and then there is X Force and stuff. And it's just way too many teams this season. And the whole X Corp thing, you can't even call this X-Men no more, because now it's X Corp. And speaking of people who have nothing to do, where the heck is Storm? How are you going to bring back the original actress who hasn't really done voice working in a long time, has that amazing voice, and then not use her? Bo DeMayo, yes. He didn't do her too much justice, but he gave her some incredible stuff to do. Like when she lost her powers and she started to like have the trauma of that. You know, that was something amazing, you know, and then he changed her hairstyle up to give her like that mohawk, and then she just traveled and found like Forge, which I will say, in between episodes, it did take her a long time to come back. And basically, when she did come back, it was very rushed as to how she got her powers back. And then all of a sudden, she just transformed into like her 80s outfit with her 80s hairstyle and what happened to the mohawk. So that was very rushed. But still, at least she had something to do. You know what I'm saying? Here is just like Brad Winterbaum's are like, oh, she's black. Don't do nothing with her. Because you know how Marvel Disney is acting right now. And it's just kind of like, what the heck? Like, she barely had anything. Even Beast had more to do than her. And Beast really never has nothing to do. And so it's kind of like this season really didn't focus much on too many people. And that really bugs me and everything. And there's just way too many teams. I just feel like this season is so scattered and nothing really is like flourishing very well because of the simple fact there's too many cooks in the kitchen and they don't want to have to do whatever, like, you know, Bo DeMayo wanted originally to do. And then there's that whole Rogue Apocalypse and like Gambit subplot at the very end. I was originally happy when he came back, so I wanted to see him in his Four Horsemen like outfit and everything. But then all of a sudden, it's just everything fell very flat. They just randomly kill Apocalypse off screen, which yes was shocking, but not that shocking. And then they had like Gambit come back and Rogue's just falling all in love with him, knowing he's evil and gonna marry him even though he's evil. They wanted a reason to bring back that celestial woman and everything that they created for the show, and like the Guild of Thieves and all that, and he just pretty much brainwashes everybody, and you can tell it's being duplicated kinda from the first season when a bunch of people get mind control and the X-Men have to like fight them, and but the action scenes just aren't that good this season, so it falls flat. Then she's able to like hear him very quickly and everything, and that storyline got rushed, and then you find out that it's not her sacrificing her life, it's actually Nightcrawler who sacrificed his life for Rogue, who sacrificed her life for Gambit. And it's just kind of like, why? You know what I'm saying? And not to mention, Rogue is very irresponsible wearing that outfit, knowing if somebody touches her arms, she will absorb them and everything. I don't get it. And so I just feel like this season is rushed. I feel like there's barely any character development. Characters barely appear on screen. And it's weird because they had one more episode in season one, and season one was able to accomplish a lot in those 10 episodes. And I don't know how they accomplished so little this season and stuff. You know, like that huge personality shift from that of like Professor X and everything. Nothing feels earned, everything just feels rushed, and there's a reason for that. So, of course, Bo DeMayo will never be quiet, signing his NDA and all that, and could care less. Even though Marvel and Marvel and Disney want him to shut up. So, of course, a fan asked him a question. And Bo explained his version of season 2, which a lot of stuff that happened in this season 2 was because of Bo Mayo. Yes, still, X Corp was supposed to be formed. Lorna was supposed to have more to do. Gyrick was supposed to become president and this and that. But like the way everything happens is completely and utterly different. He was gonna bring on I can't talk. Onslaught and everything. I can't talk. Which is a character I'm not very familiar with. I know it's the combination of Magneto and Professor Xavier, their consciousness and everything, which causes Xavier to do what he does. And so basically, this is in Bo's version. Onslaught was supposed to form that of X Corp. Professor's behavior is different and everything. This was the reason for it, not just because the professor was like really upset that a man that's been trying to kill him and his X-Men for years and all of humanity, all of us, had some like, oh no, my friend's dead, so let me be like a dictator type person. You know what I'm saying? And then Lorna was supposed to have a love connection with somebody completely different, other than Bishop this season, and just a couple of like other little things here and there, and like he was gonna do things very differently, and you can tell that he had an actual vision, and the things that I didn't like seeing this season was supposed to have more meaning and everything, and it's supposed to actually add up instead of just randomly like stuff just randomly happening and stuff. And that's the problem with like Winter Bomb and everything. It's just with Winter Bomb random stuff happens and it doesn't have no meaning to it, and I know a lot of people love this season. I know a lot of people talking about we're back, baby, and everything. I don't feel like we're back at all. I just feel like I'm not looking forward to season 3 at all. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you get me pumped for like Apocalypse? And every time Apocalypse showed up this season, I was bored out of my mind, except for when he killed Magneto, and except for when he randomly just died by the hands of Gambit. But then he transferred his consciousness into Gambit. But the way they had to defeat him inside Gambit's mind was so rushed and everything. I am not looking for season 3. They're already filming season 3. I want a brand new showrunner, and no, I do not want Bo DeMayo to come back. A lot of fans do, but still, his allegations still need to be addressed. We still need to figure out if they're true or not, and stuff like that. What a shame, because a lot of people are saying they want Spider-Man to come back from the 90s series, and I say no. if Brad Winterbaum is going to be responsible for that, because Brad Winterbaum just can't cook. He can't. Like, he seriously just can't. Like, he's not that good in everything. He's not that creative, in my opinion. Like, there have been so many better X-Men cartoons in the past. There's the original series, there's Evolution, there's Wolverine and the X-Men, there's the anime series. This one is just all right. And well, it was in season one, and now it's just kind of you know what I'm saying? And please keep this man away from anything live action related to that of the X-Men and stuff. I mean, I get it. You don't have to have Wolverine be the main center focus, but you still got to have the man in there to do cool stuff because he's a draw and everything, you know? And so I'm just disappointed. You know, I'm just really disappointed in this season. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.